I don't want to set the world on fire.
Hi everyone, this is Violet Irwin. Thanks for tuning in to another one of my Car Confessionals. In today's Car Confessional, I want to continue on with my Property Manifesto. I'm just going to keep trudging through these, and I'm excited about the one that I get to do today, which is Property of Mind. And Property of Mind is the fourth of the 4 kinds of property rights, which I've been going through so far. So we finally got to the end of sort of this introductory part where we're just defining the 4 kinds of property rights. But I'm very excited to do this today. There's a lot of fun topics within Property of Mind, and I think we should just get to it. In keeping with my previous video on Property of Body, given that this is a novel idea, I think it's important for me to explain why I think you own your mind. Although, compared to the body, I think that this is actually more straightforward of an idea. The reason why I think that you own your mind is relatively straightforward. And it's because, first of all, your brain is inside of your body, and therefore the only one who can really possess it is you. If your brain is ever separated from you, you're dead, right? It's a de facto part of your existence that you have your mind. Also, with current technology as it is, there's really no mechanism for anyone to read your mind or to get inside of your mind or your consciousness. Your consciousness is solely your own, and frankly, it's really a mystery as to how our consciousness works or what it really is at the end of the day. But for the purposes of my argument that you own your mind, I think it's fair to say that nobody else is able to control your mind or look into your mind or see what you think about in the depths of your mind. That's yours. And frankly, compared to the other 3 property rights, this is the most personal right. The mere fact that no one else can read your mind but you is a pretty clear indication that you're the one who owns it. And also that if you're ever separated from your mind, you cease to exist. Your existence is based on your mind. And sure, if you're in a coma or something like that, you might not be able to use your mind to the same degree that you normally would, but it's not as if your brain and your mind have been separated from your body somehow. Those 2 things coexist as one, and you as your body and you as your mind are inseparable. I think there's very few people who would argue that you don't own your mind, so I'm not going to spend too long on that, especially in this day and age. I think it's pretty clear that the only person who is responsible for your thoughts is you. And that's clear even on the crazy hysterical left, with people trying to blame everyone for racism and yada yada, because the only reason why the idea of racism exists is because we've assigned a certain amount of ownership to your thoughts, right? If you didn't own your thoughts, then what good would it be to call somebody racist, right? We're trying to change their mind, and we acknowledge that it's their mind to be changed. And that's a bit of a long stream of consciousness about why you own your mind, but I think it's pretty clear that you do, so we'll move on. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the bundle of sticks, as we have done with every Car Confessional I've done so far that's a Property Manifesto. So let's just go ahead and go through them, and in this process we'll get to touch on a lot of the fun issues of property of mind. The first in the bundle of sticks is the right to possess. And the right to possess in terms of your mind really goes to what I just talked about in terms of ownership, because no one else can possess your brain. It's really clear that they can't, because if you ever separated your brain from your body, you would cease to exist. So the very value of your brain is actually your ability to possess it. Because similarly, outside of the medical scientific needs that someone might have for a human brain, there's really no benefit in terms of the mind that comes from just holding a brain in your hand. You can't even think without possessing your brain. You can't exist without possessing your brain. And there's literally no other way for any other individual or entity to exercise that possession and still actually get the benefits that go along with having that brain in terms of the mind as we know it. So in terms of property of mind, the right to possess is really straightforward. We all get it. No one else can possess your brain. It's in your body, it's in your head, it's worthless without your body. The two are one and the same. You can't separate them out. So that's the right to possess in terms of property of mind. Now, the next stick in the bundle of sticks is the right to control. And this is sort of an interesting one in terms of property of mind, because in effect, this is just your ability to think. This is your ability to think about what I have to do tomorrow, to pray, to think about my friend or my family or my loved ones, to meditate, right? To visualize your future, to feel guilt about the actions you've done. Your ability to feel emotions and to have thoughts, that's all the ability to control your mind. So, and again, this is one of those things where there's actually no way for another person or entity to exercise this property right of your property of mind, because no one can control your mind, right? That's pretty obvious to all of us, at least based on current technology. We always see these sci-fi films that have, it's like, oh, we finally have reached mind control, or oh, I have in fantasy films rather, I have a magic spell that will allow me to read your mind or allow me to control your mind or control your actions. But to date, we as humans do not have a way to control somebody else's mind. We really can't do it. So our minds are ours to control, and that is a great power that comes along with our property of mind. It's one of the things that makes us human, is our ability to control our mind and to exercise free will and to control our actions. There's other issues that could fall into the right to control, such as your ability to choose who you love or choose who you hate or yada yada. But I'm going to talk about those more in terms of the right to enjoy and the right to destroy. So I'm not going to focus on that in terms of the right to control. I just think it's important to acknowledge that you are the only one in control of your mind. And frankly, even we as humans don't have that much control of our own minds, right? How often do you just say, oh man, I wish I wouldn't feel so anxious, or man, I wish I wouldn't have such a temper, or man, I wish I weren't so depressed, or any number of different emotions or thoughts that you have recurring that you just can't control. But to the extent that there's any way to control the human mind, it is the individual who exercises that control. That is the right to control in terms of property of mind. Now, the third stick in the bundle that we've gone through oh so many times before is the right to exclude. To a certain extent, what I talked about previously actually illustrates that it's pretty easy to exclude from your mind in most instances, right? Because no one can read your mind. So to the extent that the right to exclude from your mind is merely, I don't want anyone to have access to my thoughts, that's kind of a de facto, just by virtue of the way our brains work, you're always exercising that version of the right to exclude. But for this video, I wanted to touch on a few special issues as it pertains to the right to exclude in your property of mind, which are first, NSA spying, and second, hate crimes and hate speech, that kind of thing. So let's talk about the NSA first. The NSA, as we all know, along with other various spy organizations in the federal government, has been spying on the phone calls, emails, web pages, bank accounts, all this stuff of the American people. And this was all revealed kind of by Edward Snowden in the biggest way anyway, back during the Obama administration. So we kind of all know that we're being spied on. And while this spying is not a direct outlet into your brain, the reason why this starts to infringe on your right to exclude is because, in effect, this kind of spying can chill your thoughts. It can chill your freedom to think. Because if you're having a Skype phone call or something with a family member and you're using your webcam to facilitate that, you could end up in a position where you don't want to say certain things or think about certain things while you're in that position, because you might end up spouting out something that could get you in trouble. And while in America we haven't gotten to a place where people are being prosecuted for the things they say online or things that are found out as a result of government spying, you can already see that in Europe, people will Facebook something about Islam or Facebook something about immigration, and all of a sudden now they're being prosecuted for hate speech or other things like that, because what the government has done in effect is say, we are going to spy on your private conversations, and as a result of those conversations, they really do get a bit of a window into your mind. And just the mere knowledge the NSA is looking in on our conversation will change the way we think, right? It'll change the way we talk and how we communicate. It'll change how we decide to say things, what we can say in public, what we can say when we're in front of our laptop or our iPhone or whatever, what we can put on Facebook. And I noticed this even in my own life, because prior to me getting the courage to make this channel, I really saw the chilling effect of things like Charlie Hebdo on my life. When Charlie Hebdo happened, was so aghast at this and thought that the West was going to come out and support these cartoonists in France who had been shot down in cold blood just for writing, you know, a political cartoon or drawing a political cartoon. But I saw on Facebook people saying, oh no, they provoked them, they provoked them. And to me, you know, I came out and said this is awful when you support free speech, but to me, the reason why so many people have fallen down this PC rabbit hole is because their property of mind has actually been chilled by the idea that you could be punished for wrongthink. And the idea that you could be punished for wrongthink is not a crazy idea. And the reason why I'm not going to talk specifically about freedom of speech in this video is because I personally believe that it's a combination of property of body and property of mind that creates that right. So I'm not going to get into that today, but I just wanted to mention at least briefly that it's not just your speech that gets chilled with the knowledge that an entity like the NSA is watching. It's really also your thoughts get chilled. The way you start to think about the world gets chilled. We know this inherently because that's why we don't like propaganda, right? We understand that certain messages, certain kinds of imagery, certain kinds of ways of presenting things can affect the way people think about the world. It can affect their view on the world. And this is what was happening in 1984 as well. Obviously the prolific novel by George Orwell, wherein Big Brother is watching you. And in effect, wrongthink was what was being punished, because even in the privacy of your home, you couldn't be left with your own thoughts, because your thoughts were affected by the fact that Big Brother was in there watching. Your right to exclude from your mind is affected by spy agencies like the NSA, because you can't exclude them, right? They're in your head because you know they might be watching you. That is a violation of your property of mind and your right to exclude in and of itself. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about in this regard was hate crimes and hate speech, and the idea that crimes motivated by certain kinds of thoughts are worse than similar crimes or equally violent crimes that are motivated by quote-unquote better thoughts. Now, this isn't something that I'm as gung-ho about as other people, because I do understand that within law, intent matters. And the reason why you commit a crime goes toward how severe you will be punished and frankly should be punished in my mind. But when we talk about things like hate crimes, we're getting into somebody's freedom of conscience. And that is why I'm talking about this in terms of the right to exclude. So let's compare two different murders, okay? One murder is the result of some kind of scheme, okay? This guy, he takes out a life insurance policy on this individual, and he's gonna kill him so he can get the proceeds of that money. So this murder is financially motivated, but it's still a full-on murder. It's premeditated, and it's not in the heat of passion, so to speak, where someone's kind of lost their shit and that's why they're doing what they're doing, and we kind of give them a little bit of an easier time. That's why if someone commits a murder when they walk in on like their spouse cheating, that often will get reduced to a murder 2 versus a murder 1, because it wasn't premeditated, right? It was in the quote-unquote heat of passion. But in this instance, we're comparing two instances of premeditated murder. Now the other murder, it's also premeditated, but instead of it being to get insurance money, this murder is just to stick it to, I don't know, the Jews. The Jews have been vilified throughout time. Unfortunately, they're a good example for this. So let's say that it's the result of an anti-Semitic murder. Someone knows a Jewish person who lives down the street, and because they're Jewish, they plan out this whole murder and they go out and carry it out. Both murders are committed in an equally gruesome way, and both murders are premeditated, and both murders are brought under murder one charges, except in a lot of places, including my home state, the individual who committed the murder against the Jewish person would receive a tougher punishment than the individual who murdered someone for the sake of financial gain. Do I think that people should be committing murders out of hatred for a specific kind of group? Absolutely not. But do I think that that's justification for punishing someone more severely when they committed a crime that was equally gruesome and equally violent and just as premeditated? No, it doesn't. And that's part of the issue I have with hate crimes. It's because they're adding punishment onto a crime purely because of the thoughts that were associated with it. And to me, that's a part of the right to exclude. What business of it is theirs, whether you murdered him in a premeditative state because you wanted money or because he's Jewish? That's your mind. That's your property of mind. Those are your thoughts to keep to yourself. Now, you could argue that by virtue of committing such a murder, you've kind of put yourself on the front and center page, especially if it's clear that it was a murder driven by that. But why is it not horrible that someone cares more about money than someone else's life? Why is that not equally a thought crime? It's hard to answer. And the reason is because once we start saying certain thoughts are more evil than others, even if the thoughts are deplorable one way or another, or if some thoughts will be evil to anyone, right? Every thought's going to be evil to somebody. I just think it's important to acknowledge that hate crime laws are in effect a violation of the right to exclude from your mind, because what they're saying is it's a worse crime even if it's equally violent and equally gruesome just because of what you were thinking at the time. And to me, that's a very clear violation of your right to exclude from your mind. The next stick in the bundle, as you probably all recall, is the right to enjoy. And the right to enjoy really gets into some fun stuff in terms of property of mind. And the reason why is because the right to enjoy your mind gets into stuff like freedom of association and freedom of religion. So let's talk about both of those and how that actually eventually gets into gay marriage and some other stuff like that. So let's talk about freedom of religion first. Freedom of religion is in effect saying that you have a right to believe what you want to believe. You can either believe that there's a God, you can be a Catholic like me, believe Jesus Christ is our Savior, or you can be an atheist. You can believe that we're all just a bundle of worthless cells that are hurtling through space on this ball of, rock, and that's all that we'll ever be. Or you can be Jewish, or you can be Muslim, or you can be Hindu, or you can be whatever you want. As long as your practice of religion doesn't infringe on anyone else's right to practice their religion, we kind of get to coexist in this pluralistic religious culture. But the reason why this is a property of mind issue is that what you believe in terms of your afterlife, your God, your morality, your guiding light, your compass, your decision making in terms of how I should behave in this world, that's all contained up here in your mind, right? Unless I go out and write about what I believe, or unless someone actually sees me attending a church service, no one will know what my beliefs are unless I express them outside of myself. What you believe is a product of your consciousness that is contained within the privacy of your head. No one can jump in there and find out what it is without you expressing it to them. And part of being able to enjoy that privacy inside of your mind is being able to determine those very important questions that I mentioned earlier, like your afterlife, like your morality, like how you're going to act in this world. That all comes from your property of mind, and that all comes from your right to enjoy your property of mind. Because frankly, I do find enjoyment in my religion. It gives me comfort and it gives me strength. And in order to enjoy my property of mind, I have to have the freedom to choose my own religious beliefs. So that is really where freedom of religion comes from, because you have a right to enjoy your mind. You have a right with your mind to explore any philosophy, any religion that you want. and to think about it however you want without anyone coming in and interfering with that enjoyment. And what a powerful idea that is, that because you control your consciousness and because you have a right to enjoy your property of mind in that consciousness, you get to choose what you believe. You get to choose your destiny in terms of your afterlife, and or you get to choose to not believe any of it. Also within the right to enjoy is freedom of association. And freedom of association is important because this is really when we get into love and hate. In terms of love, when we think about the freedom of association, this is really a property of mind issue. And we can see that when we think about how we choose who we love, right? At least for now. You know, there's this push by the transgender community to try to say, oh, if you're not attracted to me, you're a bigot or whatever. But for the most part, we still have an understanding that who you're attracted to, who you want to kiss, who you want to have sex with, who you want to spend the rest of your life with is your choice. And it's up to you to decide with your freedom of mind if you do love someone. That's part of your mind. That's a decision that you come to in your heart and mind about how you feel about another person, what kind of relationship you want to have with that other person. And if you both come to that same conclusion in your property of mind that you both love each other, then there is nothing to stop you guys from memorializing that agreement or that relationship. Because through your property of mind, you get to decide who you hang out with, who you love, who you want to spend time with. And that decision-making process, that's all in here. That's yours to make. No one can decide which factors are more important to you or which factors are irrelevant to you. No one can decide if you're going to make an irrational decision about who you love or a rational one. It's up to you. It's your heart, it's your head, and it's your love. And so in this regard, this is why, even though I am a Catholic, I have always said that the government should have absolutely no role in deciding what two consenting adults want to do with each other, right? If they together, through their property of mind, have both decided that they love one another and they want to use their property of body to memorialize that in writing, more power to them. That's their contract to write with their freedom of contract and their decision to make with their property of mind. And for those of you who watch my channel, y'all are pretty savvy, so you probably know that the actual origin of marriage licenses was to prevent blacks and whites from getting married and having interracial marriages. And so you had to go to the state to get a license to get married to make sure that you weren't mixing. Like, that's actually why we have marriage licenses. I don't know if people realize how racist that shit is. So if I had it my way, I actually would just abolish the entire marriage license part of the government, because I really don't think that they have a role to play in that at all. If anything, there could be some system where if you get married, you could file with the state the fact that it occurred, and then, you know, that could be a record somewhere. But it certainly should not be something where the state has any say in what two consenting adults choose is a marriage or a relationship like that. So that is the freedom of association. I wanted to talk about those two in particular together because I want to make clear that the freedom of religion and the freedom of association, it's not as if these things are always super crystal clear about where they overlap, right? Because yes, you have your freedom of association. So that means that you and another consenting adult can enter into whatever relationship you want on the basis of your decision to do so, because that's your own mind making that decision. But that doesn't mean that you could go into a Catholic church as a gay couple and demand that the church perform a marriage service for you. Because in effect, now your freedom of association is starting to infringe on their freedom of religion. The sacrament of marriage, which is actually what's occurring when you go through a marriage service in a Catholic church, is a specifically defined bond between a man and a woman that has certain gifts from God and graces associated with it and responsibilities associated with it that are purely associated with the Catholic Church. Now, does that mean that a gay couple could sign a marriage contract together? or go to, you know, a Jewish church or some other church that, you know, facilitates gay marriages and get married there? Absolutely not. They can go to anywhere where it's within their religious teachings to perform a marriage that way and have a marriage. And quite frankly, a lot of people in that camp might not want to have a priest involved anyway. They might want to just, in front of all their family and friends, make vows, exchange rings, have a kiss, and then, you know, file that official document with the court later. You don't have to get married in a Catholic church to still be married in terms of what a lot of people consider a marriage to be these days. So I just think it's important to realize that the property of mind, while it has multiple rights in it, sometimes those rights can kind of bump into each other a little bit. So just to recap on the gay marriage and freedom of religion issue. As a gay couple, you have every right to decide that you love each other and want to spend the rest of your lives together. And if you want to write a contract making that binding and permanent for the rest of your life, that is up to you. That's your property of mind. That's your freedom of association. And similarly, because of our freedom of religion, if a Catholic church doesn't want to officiate a gay wedding, or if a Catholic bakery doesn't want to bake a gay wedding cake, then they don't have to do that, because their property of mind and their freedom of religion allows them to make decisions about what is moral to them, and you can't force somebody to do something which is immoral to them. It's not as if there's any religions that have exceptions to this, okay? But especially now in America, I think it's important too for me to make the point that freedom of religion does not mean that you can go up into any company or into any workplace or something like that and demand that you be accommodated for your religion, okay? Because that starts to infringe on the property of body, the personal property rights, and the real property rights of the business owner, okay? And the reason why I bring this up is because there's been so much Islamization here in America, and especially in Europe. It's gotten to the point now where people are trying to use freedom of religion to force employers to change their work schedule or to change their dress code or to change other stuff like that. And that's not what the freedom of religion is. The freedom of religion is for you to decide within your own conscience what you believe. It does not, however, give you the right to force employers to run their business differently, to hire you even if you can't abide by their business practices, or to make special accommodations for you just because you want to wear a hijab or something. It's just not, that's not what the freedom of religion is. The freedom of religion is a property of mind property right. And you can't just say, oh, because I believe X, now you're forced to submit to my will. That's not what the freedom of religion is. The freedom of religion is, I get to believe X without you coming in and telling me that I can't. It's not up to the employer to accommodate someone else's religion. It's up for that person to understand, I believe this, and if I want to practice this religion, I might have to find employers that understand where I'm coming from. And if I can't, then I can't. But it's not freedom of religion to force somebody to accommodate my religion. And that's true of atheism as well. You know, you can't force other people to not believe. You can't force other people to not read the 10 Commandments if they wanted to read the Bible if they want. It's up to them. If they want to believe, they can believe. And similarly, if you're an atheist, no one can make you believe. If you think that I'm a nut job for believing in Christ, that's up to you, man. More power to you. Write a paper about how I'm a nut job, you know? Use that property of mind however you want. But that's freedom of religion, and I'll stop ranting about it and raving about it. The next stick in the bundle is the right to destroy. And for this stick, I want to address it twofold. The first is in terms of drugs, psychotropic drugs, anything that really is mind-altering drugs. But I also want to talk about it in terms of availability of bad ideas. So first, let's talk about drugs. For those of you who are fans of Pink Floyd, which I am, they're my favorite band of all time, you'll know that Syd Barrett used to put a dose of LSD in his morning tea. Like, that was kind of the joke, right? Now, Syd Barrett was the lead guitarist of Pink Floyd, and all that LSD that he did ended up really wrecking his brain. You know, he kind of had a psychotic break. He had just taken too many psychedelic drugs, and it destroyed his mind. This great musician who was super talented at the guitar, and it helped make Pink Floyd what it was, at least in the beginning, had just totally lost his mind to these drugs. Now I tell you this story because, not because I just love Pink Floyd, which I do, but because this is an example of someone utilizing their right to destroy their property of mind. Is it tragic that that happened to Syd Barrett? Absolutely. I mean, he was a real musician. He was the real deal. And, you know, Pink Floyd would never have been what it became had he not lost his mind, because the tragedy of that event actually gave Pink Floyd a lot of inspiration for future work. But as tragic as that was, Syd Barrett still had every right to destroy his mind that way if he so chose. Should you destroy your mind that way? No, I would definitely not recommend it. Don't just start putting LSD in your morning tea. That's too much LSD. But at the same time, you know, you can't say that someone doesn't have a right to destroy their mind that way. It's their mind to destroy. If they want to do drugs and mess it up so that their memory's all fucked up and they can't even think straight and they're having a psychotic break and all that, that's their brain to destroy. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is bad ideas and how access to bad ideas is actually a property right. Because, like I said, you have a right to destroy your mind. So if you want to fill it with garbage ideas or fake news or communism, that's up to you to do that. And you have a right to destroy your brain with bad ideas. And that means that if some commie is coming to speak at Berkeley, you have a right to go listen to him, you know? Because frankly, in my opinion, there is something to this idea that, you know, my generation has just been so inundated with all this diversity, equality, communist crap that, you know, our brains are almost wired differently because we've been so indoctrinated with that. But, again, it's our brain to destroy. When I went through college, I was a psychology major with minors in opera and sociology. I know, don't ask, it's crazy shit. But in my sociology minor, we read almost exclusively Marxism, socialism. We read Marx, Engels, you know, all the socialist crazy nutbags, you know. There's no John Stuart Mill to be found in the entire sociology curriculum, but, you know, if you want to know Marxism, you will know it by the end of that. I bring that up because I was exposed to those ideas, and those ideas were so bad to me that I rejected them. I rejected them so much that one of the reasons why I'm writing the Property Manifesto and one of the reasons why I'm making all these videos is because I think we need something that's the opposite of communism. We need something that, instead of abolishing property rights, puts property rights in the highest esteem. For those people who loved Marx, for those idiots in my law school who loved critical race theory and all that other bullshit, it's their mind to destroy with that nonsense, you know? And sunlight's a disinfectant. So luckily, as people are trying to destroy their brains with these horrible ideas, often, you know, sunlight's the best exposure for bad ideas, and most people will move away from the bad ideas anyway. But to the extent that people hear these bad ideas and become indoctrinated by them and buy into them, that's kind of their freedom to do that. Like if someone wants to take a whole bunch of SJW, postmodern bullshit, Marxist, you know, critical theory classes and turn their brain into mush, that's their brain to destroy. So that's the property of mind as it pertains to the right to destroy. But there's more. So the last of the sticks that I usually talk about is the right to convey. And the right to convey, just like in property of body, is special in property of mind because, again, you can't just sell your brain to somebody else, right? You can't lift it out and give it to somebody. You can't give somebody else your consciousness. So this doesn't really manifest in a straight out sale of your brain. But where the property of mind comes in terms of the right to convey is actually intellectual property. Now, I'm going to make a whole video on intellectual property once I get into the special issues contained within the Property Manifesto. But I'll just do a basic overview today so you can get a gist of how property of mind works in terms of the right to convey. So, with intellectual property, for those of you who don't know, there's three big areas of intellectual property. The first is copyright, there's patents, and then there's trademarks. Now, copyrights, as you'll probably all know, protect creative expression. And creative expression includes books, movies, music, software even, anything that's kind of written, painting, poetry, drawing, you know, kind of all of the arts are wrapped up in there, including performing arts. So you can get a copyright in a book, and what that copyright protects is your ability to make additional copies of it. And really, this is a property of mind right, because in effect, what a copyright protects, like I said, is your creative expression. But your creative expression is really a product of your property of mind, right? It's your creativity. That's what copyrights protect. They make sure that if people are going to duplicate your creativity, that you're the one who benefits from that duplication. If people are going to mass produce your book, you're the one who benefits from that book, because that book's a product of your property of mind, right? You came up with the characters, the plot, the scenes. That's your mind being transferred onto a page. And it's the same with music and art and poetry. I mean, these are all creations of someone's mind that are being memorialized in a medium that can be protected. And that's how we get copyrights. So that's where your property of mind gets its, first kind of right to convey. Similarly with patents, patents protect inventions, okay? So an invention has to be new, it has to kind of solve a problem, and all of that. There's a lot of legal standards involved with what gets you a patent. But the reason why I'm talking about that in terms of this is because an invention too is also a product of your creativity, your ingenuity, your engineering ability, and all of those are the result of your property of mind. It's your consciousness that thought, aha, I have an idea, right? When Thomas Edison was like, oh, eureka, the light bulb, that was his property of mind being expressed. And we want to protect the property of mind, because the property of mind in terms of patents, that's what's brought us into the Industrial Revolution. That's what's brought us out of poverty. That's why we have electricity. That's why we have cars. That's why, we have washing machines. This is all the result of property of mind being conveyed in a way where it can make the world a better place. So that's what inventions are. Now, trademarks are also a product of property of mind, but might not be as straightforwardly so. And the idea is that with the trademark, you're building a brand, right? And that's actually where kind of the whole branding idea comes from with cows. People made a logo and they branded it into a cow to market as their own. And you end up doing the same thing with trademarks, right? You're saying, this product or service that I'm putting out into the world, this is a product of my property of mind, and I'm going to label it as such so that no one else in the market can get confused about where this property came from or where this product came from. This is the result of my mind, my creativity, and don't be fooled by imposters, right? And so it makes sense when we think about, there's a lot of talk about all these knockoff shoes and handbags and accessories in China. And one of the reasons why that's such a big problem is because, in effect, those people are using the brand that was protecting someone's property of mind to sell their own stuff, right? Because, for example, like if you buy a Louis Vuitton bag, okay? Louis Vuitton has their logo, the classic LV on the brown leather. That's their logo. That's their trademark. And if you try to use that logo or that trademark to sell products, on your own behalf instead of on the behalf of the person who came up with that brand or that logo, in effect, you are reaping the benefits of their intellectual property, right? Because, for example, love or hate Starbucks, they have made a brand, right? And if you are in an airport or something and it says serving Starbucks coffee, that means that you're expecting a certain level of quality in the product. And that quality level in the product was the decision of, Starbucks higher-ups or quality control people or whoever. But it was someone's choice, ultimately, to make that be the Starbucks product. And you can't use the logo associated with that choice to then promote your own products, because you didn't make that choice yourself. You can't reap from the benefits of the choices that somebody else made. I know that this is actually an area where a lot of libertarians get a little bit weird, because they're like, you can't protect ideas, man. Like there's kind of a hippie sort of, I shouldn't call them hippies, but to me there's kind of almost a stoner excuse for why people shouldn't have any rights to their intellectual property, which is that, we just need to have the free spread of ideas, and like you can't own thoughts or creativity, man. But you can, Because it's the product of your mind, and you own your mind. So if you own the products of the work of your hands, why don't you own the products of the work of your mind? And to the extent that the works of your mind can be distributed to the public in a way where you can financially benefit from them, that's you using your right to convey as it pertains to your property of mind. And the way that that manifests in our culture is through intellectual property. And I want to point out as well to those libertarians who want to give me a lot of sass about intellectual property, the founders knew that intellectual property was a big deal because they put it in the Constitution. It's actually one of the few things that Congress is legitimately allowed to regulate is intellectual property. And you can look up what the intellectual property clause says in the Constitution. But in effect, Reader's Digest version, it says that inventors and writers for a limited time shall be able to protect their works. Now, the for a limited time has been expanded beyond what I think that definition should be under our current law, but our founders, who were huge property rights types, right? I mean, Thomas Jefferson wanted to actually put that in the Declaration of Independence, but he was worried that the whole slavery thing might muddy what property is, so he didn't go there. But the individuals who wrote our Constitution, whom so many libertarians hail as, at least for their time, doing the very best they could in writing a document for a moral government, acknowledged the value of intellectual property. It was one of the few things that they were like, yes, government's gotta protect that. And not just a state government. We're gonna give Congress the right to protect it. Congress got a very limited number of powers, but intellectual property is one of them. So that's the right to convey in terms of property of mind. And with that, I have gone through all of the sticks in the bundle as it pertains to property of mind. I want to thank all of you so much for getting to the end of this video and for listening to my ideas about what I believe is truly your most important property right, which is your property of mind. But for now, I'll have to say goodbye. I hope you'll subscribe and like below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
I just want to start a flame in your heart.